Imagine standing on a high, wind-whipped cliff where the air is so salt-heavy, you can almost taste the ocean spray on your lips. The wind here doesn't just blow, it howls, pulling at your clothes and roaring in your ears. You're looking out at a horizon that seems to go on forever with nothing but deep, churning blue water for thousands of miles. Behind you lies the entire continent of Europe's centuries of empires, sprawling cities, and endless roads. But in front of you is just the wild, empty space of the world's end. This is the westernmost reach of the mainland's shadow, a place that feels like a final rugged period at the end of a very long sentence. Welcome to Ireland. When you first see this island from above, it looks like a masterpiece of chaos. It looks as though someone took a giant patchwork quilt woven from 40 different shades of green and casually draped it over the jagged rocks. The green here isn't just a color, it is an experience. It is so vibrant, so deep and bright, that it almost hurts your eyes. This is a landscape that has been softened by constant gray rain and bathed in a weirdly beautiful glowing light that shifts every 5 minutes. It's a land where the ancient and the brand new live under the exact same roof. You might find yourself commuting to a high-tech corporate office, listening to a podcast on your smartphone, while driving past a winding stone wall that was stacked by hand, stone by stone, over 1,000 years ago. But make no mistake, this isn't a story about a people living in isolation, trapped in the past. It is fundamentally a story about connection. It's about being inextricably tied to a piece of dirt that has nurtured families for millennia. It's about the melancholy and joyful songs that carry the country's soul.
I stand tall like a tree in the ground as the waves come crashing down, down, down. I stand tall like a tree in the ground as the waves come crashing down, down, down. Ocean waves rippling, spiraling inside of me. Ocean waves curling, swirling in and out. I stand tall like a tree in the ground as the waves come crashing down, down, down. I stand tall like a tree in the ground as the waves come crashing down, down, down.
Formidable cliffs in the west, like the cliffs of Moher and Slieve League. It is also what brings in the soft days. If you visit Ireland, you will hear locals speak of soft weather. These are those misty, drizzly, damp mornings where the rain doesn't fall so much as it hangs in the air, soaking you to the bone. Yet the Irish speak of it with a strange, enduring fondness. When you stand on the edge of those western cliffs, you aren't just looking at pretty scenery. You are looking at the front line of a million-year-old wrestling match. For centuries, the raw, unbridled power of the ocean has been carving away at the dark stone, leaving behind massive walls of rock that drop hundreds of feet straight into the churning white foam below. In the west, the wind has a distinct voice. It's loud, it's salty, and it is always there pushing against your front door, rattling your window panes in the dead of night, and reminding you who is really in charge. People who live out here have learned to respect the water because they know the water is the boss. You'll see old, whitewashed cottages tucked defensively into the folds of the hills, almost hiding from the gales, protected by stone walls that have stood for 3 or 4 generations. There is something deeply humbling about being a tiny human standing on top of a cliff that feels like the very edge of reality. It's loud, it's messy, and it's beautiful in a way that's a little bit terrifying. But Ireland is an island of profound contrasts. If you were to grab a car and drive from one side of Ireland to the other, a trip that only takes a few hours, you might feel like you've accidentally crossed onto a completely different planet. As you head toward the rising sun and cross over to the east coast, everything softens. The landscape feels like it finally decided to drop its shoulders, relax, and breathe. Gone are the jagged, terrifying drops, and the feeling that the ocean is trying to swallow the land whole. Instead, the shores here are gentler. The water is the Irish Sea, and it is a much calmer, more polite neighbor than the Atlantic. Living on the East Coast means having access to quiet, sandy coves. Instead of a deafening roar, you hear the steady, rhythmic lapping of waves on the shore. It's the kind of place where families head out on a Sunday morning, wrapped in thick scarves against the chill, to walk the dog along a crescent of golden sand. You'll see kids in Wellington boots poking around in tide pools, and older folks sitting on wooden benches, just watching the ferries glide over the horizon toward Wales. While the West is all about raw, untamed drama, the East is about comfort, accessibility, and peace. Even the light here hits differently. It's a bit more golden, a bit less gray. You can walk along the beach for 5 miles and never once feel like the wind is trying to knock you over. Once you pull yourself away from the coastal drama and head inland, the noise of the waves finally fades into a profound silence. You are entering the Midlands, the fertile, lush heart of the country. It's like stepping into a giant green engine room that never stops humming. Out here, the landscape isn't about jagged rocks or crashing surf. It's about endless rolling hills and fields so vibrant they look painted. This is the backbone of Ireland's farming life. For hundreds of years, families have been working this dirt. You can see the history of their labor in the way the land is carved up by ancient hedgerows. This is a living, breathing workspace. You'll see farmers out in the fields at Saltire in the morning, their breath pluming in the cold air, mending a fence or checking on their livestock while the mist is still hanging low over the wet grass. The Midlands is the center of the dairy industry, and it's no secret why. All that relentless Atlantic rain makes for the best, most nutrient-rich grass on earth. That grass produces the creamy, rich milk and butter that Ireland is famous for across the globe. Here, time isn't measured by clocks. It's dictated by the needs of the animals and the steady turning of the earth. If you want to see where the real, unfiltered stubbornness of the Irish spirit lives, you have to leave the mainland. You have to hop on a small ferry, brave the choppy swells, and head out to the Aran Islands. When you first step off the boat onto Inishmore, the largest of the islands, the first thing that hits you besides the wind that feels like it's trying to peel the skin right off your face is the stone. It's everywhere. The islands are covered in a crazy, intricate labyrinth of dry stone walls. They crisscross the bleak landscape in a pattern so tight and complex, it looks like a giant spider web made of gray rock. These walls aren't just there for decoration, and they aren't just to keep a few hardy sheep from wandering off the cliffs. They are physical monuments to a level of hard work that modern people can barely comprehend. Hundreds of years ago, there was no real dirt on these islands. It was a barren, rocky moonscape. The families living here had to build their own soil. They cleared the land, lifting the stones by hand, one by single one, to build the walls. Then they hauled heavy loads of seaweed and sand up from the beaches, mixing it with crushed rock to literally manufacture topsoil so they could grow potatoes. It was backbreaking, soul-crushing labor, but it turned a desolate rock into a home. That incredible grit is woven into the culture, quite literally, through the famous Aran sweaters. You've probably seen them in fancy boutiques in New York or London, but out here they were a uniform of survival. Every intricate stitch tells a story and holds a meaning. The cable stitch represents the fisherman's ropes, the honeycomb stitch represents hard work and its rewards. Legend has it that each fishing family had their own specific pattern. If a man was lost to the violent sea, and his body washed up on the shore weeks later battered beyond recognition, it was the unique pattern knitted into his sweater that told his neighbors who he was and which grieving house he belonged to. Moving back to the mainland, tucked into special pockets mostly found along the western seaboard, you will find the Gaeltacht region. Here, the ancient Irish language Gaeilge isn't just a heritage project or a museum piece. It is the very air people breathe. While kids across the entire island of Ireland have to learn Irish in school, as a compulsory subject. Out here, it is the mother tongue. It is spoken around kitchen tables, shouted across Gaelic football pitches, and whispered in prayers. It is a language filled with immense poetry and tiny, beautiful nuances that English simply cannot capture. It has highly specific words to describe the subtle shifts of light on a damp hillside or the deep, heavy melancholy of the sea. To the people living here, the language is a living link to their ancestors. It is a stubborn thread that has stayed unbroken through 10 centuries of colonization, famine, and history. In a world that is constantly shouting in English, keeping this ancient tongue alive is a daily, deliberate choice. It is an act of fierce pride. You see it in the way a young person switches effortlessly between their native Irish and modern English, or in the traditional music sessions where the lyrics carry stories of love, rebellion, and loss from hundreds of years ago. And there is a specific smell that tells you finally reached the heart of this ancient culture in Connemara. It's not just the salt from the ocean, though that's always hanging in the air. It's the scent of burning peat, sweet, earthy, and intensely smoky. It is the smell of history being burned to keep the living warm. Once you catch that scent on the breeze, you realize you've stepped into a part of Ireland that couldn't care less about the 21st century. Out here in the Wild West, the ground under your boots literally feels alive. It's springy turf, a deep, dark carpet of bog that has been swallowing up secrets, ancient weapons, and even preserved bodies for thousands of years. You can see the layers of time in the black banks where the peat has been cut by hand, stacked in small, messy piles to dry under a sky that changes its mind every 5 minutes. You look up and see the 12 pins massive, jagged mountains that look like they're trying to climb straight out of the dark, reflective lakes. Then, just a few miles over, those same rocky slopes drop right into the Atlantic. You might spend 2 hours walking along a boggy trail and see absolutely nothing but a few hardy sheep with painted fleece, and watch the way the light hits a distant hillside, turning it 4 different shades of purple, green, and gold in a single minute. Connemara doesn't try to impress you with fancy stuff. It offers something much rarer, a sense of being completely tucked away in a world that is usually way too loud. It's a place where you can finally hear yourself think, rooted in a landscape that is as raw and untamed as it was 1,000 years ago. While Ireland is deeply rooted in its ancient bogs and stone walls, it is absolutely not a country standing still. If you want to feel the raw electricity of a nation moving at 100 miles an hour, you go to Dublin. Dublin is the capital city where the old, dusty, romantic history of Ireland finally woke up one morning and decided to start a billion-dollar tech company. You can feel this hyperkinetic energy the second you step onto the Silicon Docks. The architectural contrast here is staggering. One minute you are walking past a row of perfectly preserved red brick Georgian houses with their famous, brightly painted doors, relics of a bygone aristocratic era, and the very next minute you are standing in the imposing shadow of a massive, gleaming glass skyscraper. Inside those glass towers, brilliant minds from 40 different countries are literally coding the future of the planet. Dublin has become the proud European headquarters for the world's biggest technology and pharmaceutical giants. Because of this influx of global talent, the city has a vibe that is totally different from the rest of the island. It is cosmopolitan, loud, and constantly, relentlessly rushing. Stand on a single street corner near the River Liffey and you will hear 4 or 5 different languages blending into the urban symphony. But Dublin is undeniably a city of 2 halves. There is a real heavy pressure that comes with all that phenomenal economic success. The cost of living is sky high. For many young, hardworking people, the simple, traditional dream of owning a house with a front door of their own feels like it is slipping further and further away with every passing year. However, despite the struggles, this remains the undisputed place to go to pursue a career in the global economy. It is a city trying its absolute best to keep its balance, keeping one foot firmly planted in its storied poetic past, and the other reaching aggressively for a digital future. If Dublin is the polished, high-profile front office of the country, then Cork is the engine room that actually keeps things running. People from Cork will tell you, with a completely straight face and absolute conviction, that their city is the real capital of Ireland. It's not just a joke, it is a deep-seated, fierce pride. Sitting on the River Lee, Cork has a gritty, honest energy that you simply don't find anywhere else. For a long time, its story was all about the harbour and traditional, heavy maritime trade. But today it is a narrative of extraordinary transformation. It is a global hub for the pharmaceutical industry. Some of the biggest medical and chemical companies on the planet have set up shop here, tucked away in sleek, ultra-modern industrial parks that sit just a few miles from ancient, towering cathedrals. This shift has turned Cork into a vibrant hub where a new generation of Irish entrepreneurs is building businesses from the ground up. The people here are incredibly loyal to their local identity. They speak quickly, melodically, their sentences rising and ending on a high note. They throw around local slang like langer, frequently emphasizing the word, like at the end of a thought. They work incredibly hard in tech and pharma throughout the week. But when the weekend hits, they pour that same intense energy into their beloved pubs and sports arenas. Then there is Galway. Galway is the city that refuses to grow up, refuses to get a boring corporate job, and the country is so much better for it. While the other cities are busy chasing tech stocks and pharmaceutical patents, Galway is perfectly content being the cultural beating heart of Ireland. It's a place where the narrow cobblestone streets are constantly vibrating with the sound of music. You physically cannot walk down Shop Street without tripping over a busker playing a fiery tune on a fiddle, or a street performer entertaining a crowd of tourists. It is a city that feels like one big, colorful, chaotic festival that never actually ends. Sitting right on the edge of the Gaeltacht regions, it is completely normal to hear the ancient Irish language being spoken naturally over a flat white in a trendy modern cafe. It is an absolute magnet for the young and the creative. People move here to study at the university and then find years later that they simply cannot bring themselves to leave. Yes, it has a knowledge-based economy, but in Galway, that knowledge is just as likely to be about independent filmmaking or mastering traditional music as it is about computer science. It's a place where you can spend your day working at a cutting-edge medical device company, and your evening listening to a 1,000-year-old song in a dimly lit, wood-paneled bar. Finally, we look to Limerick. For a long time, Limerick carried a tough reputation, a heavy industrial burden, but those days are long, long gone. Today, it is a city defined by a remarkable, triumphant transformation, driven almost entirely by the insatiable energy of its young people. Limerick is now the educational engine of the West. The University of Limerick and other colleges have turned this old town into a sleek, forward-looking center of innovation. Every year, thousands of students from all over the world pour into the city, bringing a fresh, hungry energy that has totally revitalized the streets. Modern research centers and tech hubs are popping up right along the banks of the River Shan, sitting shoulder to shoulder with the massive, imposing stone walls of medieval castles. Limerick offers its youth a bridge to a global future. They don't have to flee to London or New York for a great career anymore. They can find it right here in the thriving aviation and tech sectors. And they do it all with the same fierce, fast-paced intensity they bring to their beloved rugby pitches. keep driving north until the roads get narrower, the air gets colder, and the mountains start looking like they are physically closing in on you. Eventually, you hit County Donegal. People here often call it the Forgotten County. But once you spend a single hour looking at its jagged coastline, you realize it is utterly impossible to forget. This is the real deal North Atlantic. Imagine waking up at Fornchirten in the morning. It is pitch black outside. The rain is coming down in heavy, freezing sheets, and the wind is howling relentlessly through the gaps in the window frames, while the rest of the country is warm in bed, hitting the snooze button. The fishermen in Donegal are already down at the harbor. They are stepping onto heavy, rust-streaked metal trawlers that smell intensely of diesel, salt, and old ropes. For these men and women, the sea's bounty isn't some poetic phrase you read in a tourist brochure. It is a paycheck. It is a living that they have to go out and physically wrestle from the violent waves. Watching the return of the trawlers to a harbor town like Killybegs is a daily ritual that feels entirely separated from the modern era. It's like a scene from 100 years ago. Even though the boats are packed with modern radar and sonar, as the sun sets and the lights of the fleet flicker on the dark horizon, pulling up to the pier loaded down with crates of silver-skinned fish, you understand the eternal nature of this work. You see it in the faces of the older folks sitting quietly on the harbor walls. These are faces deeply lined by decades of salt air, harsh wind, and quiet worry. They have seen 20 or 30 brutal winters that would break most people. But they stay. They stay because there is a profound, unbreakable pride in this isolation. Now take a journey all the way to the complete opposite end of the island, down to the jagged peninsulas of the Cork coast. The vibe changes dramatically, but the soul of the coast remains exactly the same. Coastal Cork is a stunning string of brightly painted villages, pinks, baby blues, and canary yellows tucked neatly into quiet bays and clinging to steep hillsides. But do not let those cheerful, colorful houses fool you. This is a place built on the exact same grit as the freezing north, just with a slightly warmer breeze. In Cork, the fishing industry is the absolute lifeblood of the small towns. You can't walk into a local pub or a corner grocery store without hearing someone talk about the shifting tides or the current market price of lobster. But here the story is as much about the culinary magic of the kitchen as it is about the bravery on the boat. The connection between the sea and the plate is so incredibly short. You can practically see the fishing boat bobbing in the water from your dinner table. Imagine sitting in a small, crowded, dimly lit restaurant where the windows are fogged up from the intense heat of the stove. The chef brings out a steaming bowl of fresh mussels, bathed in garlic and rich cream, or perhaps a simple fillet of mackerel, pan-fried with absolutely nothing but butter and a pinch of sea salt. That very mackerel was swimming in the wild Atlantic just 5 or 6 hours ago. When you take a bite, you aren't just consuming food. You are tasting the direct result of someone's long, freezing, dangerous day at sea. The waters off the Cork coast are notoriously temperamental. 1 minute the bay is a mirror-flat calm, reflecting the clouds perfectly. The next minute, a storm rolls in that can turn the harbor into a churning washing machine. The fishing families here have been playing this high-stakes game of roulette with the ocean for hundreds of years. This culture does not take a single meal for granted because they know exactly the human cost required to get it, whether it's a high-end, elegant seafood festival or a greasy paper bag of fish and chips eaten on a rainy, windswept pier. The people of County Cork live with a deep, quiet respect for the water. They know that the ocean gives and the ocean takes, and they've spent 5 centuries learning how to live beautifully right in the middle of that terrifying balance. Ireland is a landscape written in stone, where science, history, and myth are so tangled together you can barely tell them apart. Let your mind travel to the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. Imagine standing on Vornmifé Yinsum perfectly shaped black basalt columns, all packed together like giant honeycomb cells leading straight into the crashing waves. Science tells us a very logical story. About 30 to 50 million years ago, a massive volcano erupted. The boiling lava hit the freezing cold sea and cooled so rapidly that it cracked into these perfect geometric shapes. Most are hexagons, but if you look closely, you'll find stones with 4, 5, 7, or even 8 sides. But the Irish have a better story. Local legend insists that a furious giant named Fiann Mac Cumhaill built this rock bridge all the way to Scotland just to pick a fight with a rival giant. As you wander this UNESCO World Heritage Site famous enough to grace the cover of Led Zeppelin's Houses of the Holy and evoke serious Game of Thrones vibes, you can spot the giant's bootstone towering organ pipes and a wishing chair naturally carved by the wind and waves. It is a magnificent collision of geology and folklore. Further south in County Tipperary sits the Rock of Cashel. Local legend claims a giant devil took a massive, furious bite out of a nearby mountain and spat it across the countryside because he was mad at St. Patrick. This towering limestone outcrop has been the heart of Irish power for over 1,000 years. It was right here in the Forntum Zay that St. Patrick himself supposedly plucked a tiny, 3-leaved shamrock from the grass to explain the complex concept of the Holy Trinity to King Angus. During the baptism, things got bloody when Patrick accidentally spiked the king's foot with his sharp wooden staff. The king didn't even flinch, he just assumed the excruciating pain was a standard part of proving his Christian faith. Speaking of Patrick, his legacy is everywhere yet full of surprises. Every March the 18th, the world chugs over 30 million pints of Guinness. But Patrick wasn't even Irish. He was born in Roman Britain around 1380 AD, kidnapped by pirates at Thusian, and enslaved as a shepherd in Ireland before escaping and later returning to preach. He didn't chase snakes out of Ireland. The island has been snake-free since the Ice Age. The snakes were just a metaphor for paganism. Even his color was originally St. Patrick's blue, with green only becoming the go-to color during the 18th century independence movement. At St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin, the largest in Ireland, built over the very well where he baptized converts, you can still hear a choir that has been running continuously since Mortimer Thesis. And ironically, the world's first Patrick's Day parade wasn't in Ireland at all. It happened in Floridaine and Sauvignon. For most of the 20th century in Ireland, it was a strict, solemn religious holiday where all the pubs were legally forced to close, only becoming the flowing festival we know today in the 19th century. Then there are monuments built of love and sorrow, like Kylemore Abbey. Back in the 20th century, a wealthy doctor began building a spectacular, sprawling castle in the rugged countryside simply as a gift for his beloved wife, who had fallen in love with the mountains on their honeymoon. When she tragically died of a fever at just 49, he was utterly broken. To honor her, he built a breathtaking miniature cathedral on the grounds. Later it became a sanctuary for Benedictine nuns fleeing the horrors of World War I in Belgium. For 20 years, they ran a prestigious girls' boarding school within its walls. Today, the nuns are still there, quietly making handmade chocolate and pottery. In their meticulous Victorian walled garden, an incredibly strict rule applies. If a plant variety didn't exist before Northaintil Morn, it simply isn't allowed to grow there. But if you want to touch the deepest roots of human existence, you must stand inside Newgrange. Imagine standing in a dark, cold stone chamber in the countryside, knowing with absolute certainty that the structure around you is 1,000 years older than the Great Pyramids of Giza. Over Heighton years ago, ancient farmers built this massive mound without a single drop of mortar. They hauled sparkling white quartz from over 30 kilometers away on river rafts. But their true genius was astronomical. Every year, on the winter solstice, a single, brilliant beam of morning light pierces through a tiny opening called a roof box. It travels exactly 18 meters down a narrow stone passage, perfectly illuminating the floor of the inner chamber for precisely 60 minutes. It is a cosmic clock, a masterpiece of ancient engineering that draws tens of thousands into a lottery every year, all hoping to be one of the selfie lucky souls to stand in the dark and witness our ancestors' profound connection to the stars. Eventually, all the grand history, the roaring oceans, and the bustling cities must give way to the quiet pulse of everyday life. To truly understand this island, you must leave the wide highways and venture onto the borines. These are the tiny, winding, labyrinthine country roads where a strip of green grass grows defiantly right up the middle of the tarmac, and the hawthorn hedges are so high you cannot possibly see what is around the next blind turn. Driving a boreen is an exercise in profound patience. You might have to jam your rental car into a muddy ditch for 10 solid minutes, just to let a massive tractor or a wandering herd of sheep pass by. But that inconvenience is exactly the point. Out here, isolation breeds courtesy. Everyone waves. Even if they have absolutely no idea who you are, you will get that subtle, knowing little finger flick off the steering wheel as they pass. It is a silent, unwritten code of the countryside that simply says, "I see you, and we are in this together." And eventually, if you follow them long enough, every single one of those narrow, twisting roads seems to lead to a local pub. But you must understand, a real Irish pub is not a bar, it is the community's living room. It is a sanctuary. It is a place to walk in out of the rain, take off your heavy coat, and finally exhale. This is where the season happens. This isn't a rehearsed concert or a performance for tips. It is a spontaneous eruption of music. Someone quietly pulls a battered fiddle from its case. Another person grabs a tin whistle. A bodhran drum starts a heartbeat rhythm. Suddenly the room is vibrating with songs that have been passed down for 4 or 5 generations. There are no rock stars here, no egos. The music is just a shared conversation among friends, carrying the weight of centuries in every note. When Sunday rolls around, that shared conversation moves out of the pub and onto the Gaeilge pitch. Whether it is Gaelic football or the ancient sport of hurling, a game played with ash sticks that is so incredibly fast and physical it looks like a beautiful, highly controlled riot, this is where parish pride lives and breathes. You could be a high-flying, ruthless corporate lawyer in Dublin all week. But on Sunday, when you pull on that jersey, you are nothing more and nothing less than a representative of your home village. These amateur clubs are the absolute soul of every parish, the focal point where the community rallies together in victory and in defeat. So when you look at it all, the relentless rain, the howling Atlantic winds, the history of hardship, and the sheer, overwhelming power of the landscape, you have to ask, why do people choose to stay? When the rest of the world is wide open and calling their names, why remain on this small, wet rock at the edge of Europe? They stay for the safety of a community that acts as a watchful, loving embrace for their children. They stay for the music that makes the dark winters bearable. They stay for the smell of the peat fire, the wild roar of the ocean, and the absolute certainty that in a world moving far too fast, there is still a place where your neighbor knows your name. It is a rugged, beautiful period at the end of a long sentence. It is home.